All right, so a host of a separate program from this, it's a program called American Thought Leaders. It's hosted by a fellow Canadian. His name is Jan Jekielek. And they recently had an interview with, is it the founder or the co-founder?
Co-founder.
Or the co-founder of Wikipedia, a website that I'm sure everyone watching this has used at one point or another. And he had some choice words to say about where the program has developed since the early 2000s. Cindy?
Yes, Larry Sanger was one of the co-founders. He left Wikipedia, I don't know, less than 2 years after it was founded. So he left in 2002 and has basically become one of its strongest critics, because what he sees is that it deviated from, the original vision of it. He was one of the people that actually wrote the original neutrality policy, which is one of the areas that he's unhappy with. There's kind of three big areas that they talked about on American Thought Leaders the other day, and broke some news. It was a very interesting interview. But let's just start with just a little bit of what he says about the neutrality policy, so you can understand where it went from the beginning.
Wikipedia's neutrality policy says, or at least used to say, that on issues of controversy, it should be impossible to tell what position the authors of the article take. That's no longer the case in practice for sure, and the policy page called Neutral Point of View has been in subtle ways rewritten so that it forbids what's called false balance, which just means basically it's required now, even for the sake of neutrality, that they take a side when one side is clearly wrong, in somebody's opinion.
That doesn't sound like neutrality.
No.
So one of his biggest criticisms of the current version of Wikipedia is the obvious left-wing bias. And he's saying it got especially pronounced after Trump was out of office the first time. He said it kind of moved in parallel to a lot of the mainstream media that also displayed this bias. And what he's explaining there is that what the policy used to be is that you shouldn't be able to tell the political bent of the author of a page, but now it's almost baked into it, because if they decide with kind of a specific worldview that he says permeates the organization, decide that something is just objectively wrong, then it's fine for the page to be biased, essentially.
Well, and the editors, I guess, get to decide that it's objectively wrong.
Yeah, and so
the known editors or the
okay,
mystery
yes,
editors?
this is a big part of his criticisms too, is that most of the people editing those pages, all the power ones, are actually anonymous, right? So 85% of the top 62, which they call the power users, the most powerful editors, users, are anonymous. So we don't know how many of those pages might actually be all controlled by the same person or some
Out of Langley, Virginia.
organization
Or another country.
or another country, because the Oversight Committee is currently investigating foreign influence in Wikipedia. The point is we have absolutely no idea who's controlling the vast, vast majority of the content of Wikipedia.
So they can really remain both anonymous, like name-wise and IP-wise?
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
if I was another country, I would 100%
Exactly.
have a small department dedicated
Imagine
to it.
China
100%.
having
Of
an
course.
editor
And
on Tiananmen Square.
Obviously, right? And there's all these backdoors too. He's like, because you can influence, it's very hard. Okay, if you have a page, and this is how the conversation started, that the Epoch Times page, for example, is very biased. If you were to go to it knowing nothing about Epoch Times, you would come away with a very negative impression and never go read that publication. And there, it's a battleground for years, but the battle has been lost by those that want to spin it, a certain way. And there's another problem with sources, which I'll get to, but put a pin in that one. But there's put that pin there. So there's nothing you can do to affect your page, right? And you don't even know, the authors can say completely slanderous thing, but there's no person to go after. Wikimedia, because of Section 230, is immune to any sort of tort, immune to any liability for it. So there's literally nothing you can do, and there's no one to hold liable for it in the current configuration of how it works.
When certain pages that are maybe more
But you can pay a PR company a lot of money to go in and do it, which means there's backdoor channels.
Exactly, there's backdoors. When certain things are highly controversial, certain pages get locked.
Yes.
And then but still some higher level people can edit the page. So who are those people? Are they known actors? Or are they these unknown?
85% are unknown, so some must be known, and a big chunk of them are unknown. But this backdoor channel thing is also an issue, right? Because you can pay a PR company some, amount of money to get your page fixed.
But I think one of the things that the PR company does is they have like people on staff who are just like anons, who are just like editors, power editors themselves, because you can't know who the person is, but you can't look through their editing history. So if it's like very long.
Yeah. Well, of course, but you can set up a firm. Like, just imagine how you're gaming it, right? You're one of these anonymous power editors. Now you set up your firm to go fix people's problems. It's a mafia, if you think about it.
Because you can create the problems that you can fix, right?
Exactly. Let me take care of that problem for you,
Well, okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, a third point that he brings up is sourcing, right? So this is hilarious. Wikipedia actually is preferential to secondary sources instead of primary sources. So basically, other media accounts is a big thing. Two issues here. Issue number one is that they've created a list of media that you can use and lists of media that you cannot use, that are blacklisted or highly restricted. So on the list of medias that are greenlit that you can use are things like New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, BuzzFeed, Al Jazeera. On the list of media that you can't use, you will find Newsmax, OANN, Epoch Times, and generally conservative-leaning media. So there's an issue there already if all the sourcing has come from there. But also, it doesn't prioritize primary sources. So there was this case a few years ago where Philip Roth, who's an author, one of the books he wrote is called The Human Stain. There was incorrect information on his Wikipedia page saying that his main character was inspired by so-and-so. He contacts Wikipedia, says this is not true. And they're like, no, sorry. They write back, wait, the quote is great. They wrote back saying, I understand your point that the author is the greatest authority on their own work, but we require secondary sources. So he had to go write an article in the New Yorker so that they could come back, and now on the Wikipedia pages, Roth described in a 2012 piece for the New Yorker, blah, blah, blah.
That's wild. Okay, just as a room full of journalists here, right? The goal ultimately is to pursue the form of most clear truth, right? And
Go to the
also
source.
Personally, yeah, no kidding. And as someone who reads a lot of scientific papers as part of my work, that's just unbelievable to me. Also, a quick little bit of irony, I couldn't help but notice this. On that Wikipedia webpage, you see that little symbol that shows up in the corner in the clip that we just saw a minute ago? It's the scales of justice. The irony of that is just, I can't.
Okay, I will give the Steelman argument for that, which is that let's say the author should be able to change it himself, but then what if I come in and I say, well, I'm actually the author, and I have a different idea for why that character was the way he was. So how do you decide whether I'm the author or he's the author?
No, author of the book.
I understand.
The page is about.
I understand, but how does anybody prove that they're the author, right? Other than going to
We have
let's say
proof of who you are all over the place.
Yeah,
right?
there are so many web pages that have that kind of thing. Even as an example, right? Reddit, the land of anonymity. Even then, most subreddits have kind of their own process where moderators can go in the back end. You can have private messages and say, here, I don't want to share this publicly. Here's my proof of who I am, et cetera, et cetera.
So hold on. You're saying if the author made a Twitter post on his own verified account and he said, no, this is incorrect, this is actually why the character was made, that is not sourceable? It had to be from the New Yorker?
Well, no. The secondary sources, and mostly they're listing media or some entity that's summarizing information. So I don't know if they would consider a social media post. I don't feel like it because I don't think you see that much in the Wikipedia pages, but some authoritative, trusted media that has taken that and incorporated into their article,
right?
They would accept.
How did this policy happen? How did this come about? How is this allowed to continue? Even as a private company, you can do what you want, okay, but that seems outrageous.
Another aspect is not just the words that are used in the sources, but also the series that they categorize things in. I've noticed this is subject to bias and, probably fraud. They'll put a certain page, it could be from a random author about, contemporary American politics, and they'll put it in a series on fascism. And then they'll kind of malign the person by doing that as believing in those principles.
Yeah. They do a lot of that guilt by association kind of
Exactly.
thing. Actually, he's got some solutions, and it was interesting because he actually came up with one of them during the interview. So I guess they broke some news. But he has put on his website, which is larrysanger.com, a list of like 9 treatises. It's like, he nailed them to the virtual door of Wikipedia, as Jan said in the interview. And a lot of them are about, you can go find them on larrysanger.org, and it's things like, end decision-making by consensus, enable competing articles might be a way, abolish these blacklists, revive the original neutrality policy, all of these kinds of things. But here, let's just play a little clip where he's talking about other potential solutions and how the public might get involved.
Congress and the general public can raise a hue and cry and bring real pressure to bear.
So the public can, apply pressure to Wikipedia. He's saying maybe there'd be a protest letter, that could be signed by, all the maligned actors who feel their Wikipedia pages are irreparably harming them, and something can be done.
How about the Great Encyclopedia Declaration?
There we go.
Okay, so that fits into our broader segment for today's episode, which has to do with media literacy. So now you know why you shouldn't be trusting Wikipedia, because as the mainstream media kind of moves in a certain political direction, because all the articles have to be linked to a mainstream media, Wikipedia naturally starts leaning in a certain direction. Very interesting way that works, right? Kind of a tail wagging the dog situation. Okay, but that's like the encyclopedia portion. What about mainstream news outlets?
Well, the point that Chris brought up was a little bit interesting about guilt by association. So I was reading All Sides, which is an interesting website. They'll basically take an issue and they'll look at how it's been treated by media that's traditionally, they rate different media on the left, on the right, on the center, and compare what they do. So they did an interesting analysis the other day of stories about how media covered the South Carolina judge's house that was set on fire, or not set on fire, that burned down, right? And very quickly, the narrative developed how it was probably set on fire on purpose and by people who were unhappy with her, dispute with Trump. So here are some of the headlines, and this is exactly this guilt by association. This is before there was any investigation, before anything was out whatsoever. So Time magazine had, here's the headline: investigation ongoing after House of South Carolina judge criticized by Trump administration burns down. Like, is there a connection between those two facts? I don't know, but they're in the headline together. The Independent said South Carolina judge's $1.5 million home destroyed in huge fire with family forced to jump for the window. The subhead was ruled against Trump administration last month. Newsweek, which they consider center, Judge Diane Goodstein, home burns to ground after ruling against Trump. The Telegraph, which is more right generally, but not so happy with Trump all the time. Judge received death threats before her house went up in flames. So all these things, just connecting those two things, before there's any investigation, any evidence, anything at all.
That's not good.
No, that was not good.
That's
right?
not good.
And you might, if you read the article, realize, there's investigation preliminary, there's no reason to believe this or that. But even just putting the information, house burned down, had a, spat with Trump or, ruled against Trump.
Okay, so that's one way that the media lies to you. They put two disparate facts together that are completely unrelated. Another way that the media lies to you, this is an example out of MSNBC. So Benny Johnson is a conservative influencer out of Florida. So he had a man threaten him and his family, like some kind of death threat.
A letter.
A letter, yeah, it was in the form of a letter. And so this is the way MSNBC reported it. DOJ charges man with sending threatening letter to a conservative influencer with deep ties to the Trump administration. So that's the MSNBC headline. Benny responded to it, and I think his response is very apt, and it's along the lines of what you were saying. This is what Benny said. The left-wing terrorist who committed a crime by threatening to kill my family is simply called a man by NBC, but I'm framed as a conservative influencer with deep ties to the Trump administration. This is coded language by NBC to signal that my family deserved it. Now, okay, maybe that second part is just his opinion. But there is something to it, right? When you just say man, and then you kind of like frame the other guy as like as what you know your audience won't like.
Who's the real criminal?
That's another aspect. Exactly.
Wasn't the picture one of Benny looking kind of?
I completely forgot that. So they called him a deep ties to the Trump administration, and the photo underneath is not of the guy who they arrested for sending the letter. It's Benny Johnson looking like real fierce. So anyway, that's another way that the media lies to you. That's not good.
No, it's not good.
No.
And then there's another way that the media is not lying, but can be impersonated. Actually, Epoch Times has been experiencing this. So trying to defame the Epoch Times. So the other day, October 7th, I think it was, an envelope arrived at the office with a little baggie with white powder in it. Who knows what it is? Obviously, that's meant to intimidate or threaten. It was sent to the FBI. We don't know yet what was in it. But this follows a whole spate of incidents where the CCP has been trying to frame and defame the Epoch Times. So they impersonated Epoch Times editors and people with the paper, and sent crazy messages to all kinds of to the White House, DOJ, to a whole bunch of different FBI, the Parks Commission, I don't know, a whole bunch of different.
That's in the U.S., right?
That was in the U.S., but also there was Taiwan, Czech Republic, like people, where else? UK. So impersonating the Epoch Times, sending just crazy things. Also to going on YouTube channels and putting all kinds of spam, claiming to be an Epoch Times editor, impersonating an Epoch Times editor.
And in Taiwan, I feel like Tiffany told me about this. There was an incident where somebody impersonating, it was a CCP agent impersonating an Epoch Times editor, and he got a bunch of interviews with like Taiwanese legislators, right?
Yeah, so it was a Chinese intelligence officer, and she was posing as a reporter for the Epoch Times Hong Kong bureau. And so this is in Taiwan. And she was leveraging the widespread trust that the Taiwanese government and officials had in the Epoch Times and NTD over the years to then try and get information. So part of this was she was able to get information from a former Taiwanese naval officer, who then introduced her to a Taiwanese missile brigade officer, and she was able to get non-public military information. She paid them by leveraging, again, the trust being like, I work for this media.
This is off the record. Don't worry, what you tell me, it's not going to go in the paper. Oh yeah, where are the missiles again? That's rough. Don't get any ideas watching this. We've tightened up our security. It won't happen again. All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow and also check out either these videos or maybe they're on this side. I don't know which side they're on, but we set it up. So these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side,